Welcome to the Moms and Mental Health panel. I've been waiting for this for a while. I've been advertising it for a while on my Instagram page at Cassandra Blooms, just in case you didn't know that already. But I'm very excited to introduce our panelists, our experts. They are here to tell us everything there is to know about motherhood, mental health, and ways in which we can get some help. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce the three panelists. The first here is Dr. Tanya Cutler. She is going to introduce herself in just a moment. Erica Jossa is the second, and the third is Dr. Beverly Young. So take it away, ladies.
Thanks so much, Cassandra. Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Tanya Cutler. I am a clinical psychologist. I specialize in maternal mental health and infant mental health and the parent-child attachment bond. And I run my own private practice with a number of doctoral associates who work with me, and we run workshops and groups and individual psychotherapy for moms, dads, and primarily children 0 to 5. Okay, so in talking or thinking about what I was going to talk about today, what kept coming to my mind was, you know how when you go on a trip or you travel, and I guess with a kid, you travel and it's a trip, not a vacation. And it always takes a few days to kind of arrive there, to settle in. You have to figure out what restaurant, if you go to a restaurant, opens at 5 for your early eaters. You have to figure out when you get to your accommodations, how you can get there with a stroller. You have to figure out where to buy diapers or formula if you forgot to bring it. And sometimes there's a part of you that even when it's this amazing trip or vacation, that misses home a little, that misses aspects of home. Well, motherhood, the kind of ultimate trip, we somehow often expect that we're just supposed to arrive, settle in. Baby comes. Yes, I just did that motion. Baby comes. And we're there, right? Whether there is bliss, whether there is happy, whether there is fulfilled, whether there is knowing all there is to know, we're supposed to just arrive. Except the journey to conception is often a long journey in and of itself. Tomorrow's Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Day. Anyone who has experienced loss knows what a journey conception and pregnancy can be. Birth, in the many ways that someone can birth a baby, is a journey in and of its fucking self, excuse my French. And then baby's arrival and being there, motherhood, is a journey of itself. Your hair changes, your hormone changes, your body changes, your friends change, your relationship with your partner changes, and your relationship with yourself totally changes. It's a complete identity shakeup from the inside out. And Alexandra Sachs, a famous perinatal psychiatrist who I'm privileged to know in New York, has kind of gone ahead and termed this matrescence, a term that she took from anthropology. And it sounds, if you haven't heard the term, just like what you think you hear, adolescence, a time of hormonal change and pimply skin and identity shakeup. And with adolescents, we know that they're going through a myriad of emotions, and we talk about it, right? Why not with motherhood? Why isn't there permission to feel all the feels of motherhood as you go through matrescence? So there is that loss and sadness of the parts of you no longer feel like you're connected to, your freedoms, your hobbies, the relationships. There is anger because you're hyper-focused, and you are, by the way, evolutionarily hyper-focused on your baby. It's called maternal preoccupation. There are hormones that make you preoccupied on your baby's mind and your baby's behavior. But sometimes to the kind of extreme that you are neglecting your own mind, what matters to you, your own needs. And I call that, in that anger in motherhood, the agency roar. It's like, hi, see me now. I matter too, right? So of course, there's a little bit of anger that boils up. There's anxiety, this unknown territory, this uncharted territory. First time I'm navigating this. Of course, there's base level anxiety that I know Dr. Young is going to talk about the differences in when we feel anxiety, but of course there's a base level anxiety. And when we don't normalize the anxiety, the anger, the sadness, then you feel lonely, you feel isolated, you feel guilty. I'm not supposed to feel this way. So what I'm hoping today is to kind of start us off with this permission to feel all the feels of motherhood. They're all part of it. They're all part of re-becoming you. They're all part of the travel that you're on.
What an introduction. Thank you so much, Dr. Cutler. And I'm going to hand over the mic to Beth Young, our second panelist today. If you can give us a short introduction of who you are, and I'd like to get into some of the questions, please. So if you guys could just, yeah.
Are you on mute, Beth?
Sorry, I was going to ask Erica to go second, if that's okay.
Oh, absolutely. Go ahead, Erica.
Sure, yeah. So I'm Erica Jossa. I am a maternal mental health specialist. I keep my own teletherapy private practice, as well as I run a large Instagram account and platform for moms. So that includes a maternal mental health podcast, Instagram page, free resources, mom kind of coaching membership community, lots of different resources there. And to carry off of what Dr. Tanya was saying, I think that in this conversation today, we're trying to lay out some really fundamental topics to get some questions coming in and answering some questions for you guys. And Dr. Tanya really addressed the transition and this adjustment into motherhood. And one of the things that I spend a lot of time talking to my clients about is this idea of what it means to be a good mother. I find that we are chasing this very elusive, vague definition of what it means to be a good mom. Every mom that I speak to wants so badly to get it right for their baby. But when I ask them, what does it mean to get it right? What does being a good mom truly mean to you? The answer is really fuzzy and kind of vague and often shaped by others' expectations, ideals, and things that we've taken in through, Instagram and watching kind of mom influencers, or we've taken in media and in society. So I think that it's really important to actually kind of sift out some of the noise of what we think a good mom should be, the expectations that are put on us about a good mother, and kind of go back through this file that we have in our minds that we've been accumulating our whole life from the time that, we could internalize what a mom meant, and start to kind of like shred the documents that no longer fit with our definition. We never had like a critical filter or filing system in place before, when we were compiling all these ideas about what it meant to be a good mom, and everything got put into this big, massive file in our brain. Some of it is junk mail. Some of it is others' expectations. Some of it aligns with our own personal values. And it's all in just kind of this big heap. And until we get into the motherhood role, we can't really make any sense of it. So I think that it's really important for us, and maybe we can continue this in our conversation today, to talk about the role of expectations and shoulds in motherhood, because often those shoulds that we're trying so hard to live up to and to do right by are not, in fact, our own expectations for ourselves or in line with our own internal values.
Thank you so much for that, Erica. And last but definitely not least, Beth Young is the third panelist today. Beth?
Hi, guys. So I'm going to do a brief introduction, then I'm going to talk a bit about anxiety before we hit the questions. So I am what's called a perinatal mental health specialist. I'm a psychiatrist at Mount Sinai Hospital, and I specialize in women's mental health. But specifically, I see women who have mostly anxiety, which I'm going to get into, or depression, or any mental health issue. Often it's just an adjustment reaction to pregnancy, postpartum, infertility, loss, termination. So really any reproductive mental health issue. And I have to tell you, when I started the program just about 19 years ago, we were getting maybe one referral a week, and now we get 10 a day. So I love the fact that people are talking about it, that people are even using postpartum as a noun. They say, I'm worried about getting postpartum. It's an adjective. It's not but I love that that's we all know what postpartum means. And I love that there's more recognition, although there still isn't enough. And I still feel like we're not getting at the people who really need the help and need the help of a physician as well as therapy. So today I want to talk a bit about the thing that I think most important is postpartum anxiety. So postpartum depression, just so you guys know, it's actually a misnomer because it's more often anxiety. Even pre-COVID, we've been seeing a lot more anxiety than depression, and it usually happens in the third trimester. So this is not something to just think of in the postpartum. It also starts in pregnancy, as does guilt and the idea of the perfect mom and everything that was already talked about. And I want to just try to differentiate because everyone, of course, nowadays, everyone is stressed. And I think there was a study done in May that 1 in 4 Canadians feel stress over in their life right now. And this was, of course, triggered by COVID. But I want to discuss what the difference between stress and anxiety is and when you actually need to get more help. Just to clarify, anxiety is the fear of the unknown. So it's not knowing what's out there. It's, I mean, if we had all the answers, if we knew when COVID was ending, if we knew that we weren't going to get it, if we were in a certain crowd, then we'd be happier, we'd be okay, we'd be more relaxed. So anxiety is the ultimate fear of the unknown. And when I talk about the physical symptoms and the emotional symptoms. So the physical symptoms are more like the panicky, it doesn't have to necessarily be a panic attack. It could be this sort of chronic chest pain or heaviness, short of breath, pit and stomach, numbness and tingling. So those physical, sometimes it's headaches or tightness in your neck. And then the emotional symptoms are the ruminations, the worries, the negative thinking, and the sort of intrusive thoughts that, and often they're worst case scenario thoughts that we have trouble getting rid of. So again, a lot of times we have this. I mean, you know, I remember carrying my baby down the stairs and thinking, oh my God, what if I dropped her and she smashed her head open? And every mother can relate to this. And you can actually picture your baby with, I mean, it's a horribly graphic picture, but you can picture it in your head. But then I would go on with my day and say, you know what, that's just silly. That's not going to happen. And maybe I'd hold her a bit more closely. But I go on with my day. So the big thing about when anxiety becomes pathological or a problem is when it interferes with your functioning. So what does that mean? It means you can't do your day-to-day activities because you always have those worrying thoughts in the background. You can't be in the moment. We do a lot of mindfulness training. We even run a group at Sinai for a mindfulness group for pregnant and postpartum women. And it's all about being in the moment. Can you actually be in the moment and take pleasure in your child without having that list running through your head of all the other things you should be doing? That's interfering with your functioning. Is your anxiety interfering with your relationships, either your relationship with your partner, with your toddler who's at home? Sometimes anxiety comes out as anger or rage, and really it's just the anxiety building up. Is your anxiety interfering with your ability to be productive at work or to concentrate? And the other big thing is to think of, is your anxiety interfering with your sleep? And I know you're going to say, well, of course, my sleep is disrupted anyway. I'm up every 3 hours to feed the baby, or my toddler's still waking up, or I'm pregnant and uncomfortable. But the key is, when you do wake up, can you go right back to sleep? Or are you up and then you start ruminating and worrying and having those thoughts? So the big thing is, for those women out there who think that they have anxiety, and there are a lot of women out there who know anxiety feels like, they've had it for a lot of their life, and they've used it as a tool to be motivated. You know, anxiety is a motivator. It gets you going. CEOs of major companies are generally anxious or perfectionists or like things to be a certain way. But then it comes to a point where it can be maladaptive and interfere with your functioning. So that's what I want you guys to think about. Is that happening? Is it becoming a concern where it's interfering with your functioning and you think you need more help? So I'm going to leave it at that, and hopefully we'll take some questions.
Yes, it's thank you so much for making that distinction. I know myself, in my circle of moms, and I run a mom blog myself. It's kind of used as an adjective. Like I get anxiety. It's just the word that's thrown around. But to think of it deeply like that, and to really set it apart from like what postpartum depression is, it's very interesting, very important. So I'm going to start the questions. I have quite a few here. So if we can be mindful about the length of the answers, I'd love to get as many questions as possible with the remaining time that we do have. So I'm going to start with Erica. Is there a concrete definition of a good mother? If so, what do you think that would look like?
I think that there is, like, every mom's definition of what it means to be a good mother is subjective. It's subjective based on a couple of factors. How we were raised and the mom that we were raised with is going to shape our own definition of what we want to gravitate towards or what we really want to push away and don't want to be like. Our internal values play a big role in our own definition of what it means to be a good mom. Our culture and our religion and our sort of religious values can play a role. So at the end of the day, there is no one perfect way. There is no one perfect definition of what it means to be a good mom. And that's why it is so fundamentally important, I think, to really hone in on what it is you're aiming for, because we're all chasing after, we're all trying to do this motherhood gig right. And we're kind of on autopilot trying to hit the bullseye. But until we kind of step back, tune into our internal values, sit down with our partner and talk about what are our values as a family and our parenting approach and philosophy and values, then we're really just kind of on autopilot, repeating patterns and behaviors that we were raised with without intention. So no, there's not one definition. You are free and at liberty to create your own based on your values.
But I love that word, intention. Intentional parenting really gives you the impression that, as long as you can do that, maybe you can figure it out for yourself. Next question is for Dr. Coulter. Why do mothers often feel so much guilt? I know you touched a little bit on that in your intro, but if you can give us a little more insight on why that is.
For sure. I think, first of all, Erica led us into it. Let's talk about what is guilt. So guilt tends to be an emotion that we feel when we are going against what we think are the expectations for us, either externally or internally, how we're supposed to behave or feel or think. It should be differentiated from shame. Sometimes they're used interchangeably, and shame is when we personalize it. So for example, I yell at my kid, and now I say, oh my God, I shouldn't have yelled because my expectation for myself or the expectation I think from the outside is that I'm supposed to be the perfect patient, mother hero, and I just lost it. Shame would be when I go to a personalization, I'm a bad mom because I just yelled. So we personify it. It's not just the momentary behavior that we feel guilty about. I think moms feel guilt for the reasons that Erica started to really touch on, largely because sometimes if we are measuring ourselves up against a perfection standard, against the social, historical, cultural standard expectation of motherhood, be it whatever that is, a happy mom, a good mom, sometimes we don't even know what that is. So we'll feel guilty because it's so diffuse that we haven't even identified what we're trying to compare ourselves to. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's internally motivated, right? If we were raised and we had what's called ghosts in the nursery, Selma Freiberg, a psychologist, termed that. And that's times where we felt unseen or unloved or like we didn't matter. And so we're trying to fix our parenting mistakes. We're trying to reparent ourselves, but also our kids. And so when we feel like we are repeating the injuries we had, we may feel guilty. And so really, to Erica's point, it starts to become aligning with what matters to you, with your values. The last reason I like to really emphasize with guilt is that guilt tends to be a secondary emotion. It's a feeling about a feeling. So it's like, I call it the smokescreen feeling. Sometimes guilt will come up when we feel like we're not entitled or don't have permission to feel certain things. And that's why, of course, at certain points of any emotion, sad or anger and anxiety, we may need help. We may need to look at them. But also identifying that a level of permission to feel all feelings, that coping with feeling, the goal isn't to eradicate or fix or repress certain emotions. The goal is to be with an emotion without it taking over you. And so the guilt of feeling I shouldn't be anxious is very, very common. I shouldn't be angry. And to kind of catch when you feel guilty and wonder, what am I actually primarily feeling? What is the original feeling that I'm feeling guilty?
I love that. Thank you so much. And I'm going to move on to another question. Let's go with Dr. Bev. I've experienced postpartum anxiety after my daughter. So is it highly possible that I will go through it again? If so, is there anything that I can do to prevent it?
So anyone who has a history of postpartum depression or anxiety is going to have a 50 to 60% chance of relapse in the next pregnancy or postpartum period. And I think that the highest risk still is with the first, because you kind of don't know what you're doing, and there's so much learning that happens, and you're going to make mistakes, and again, you're dealing with this idea of the perfect mom that was discussed already. That doesn't exist, by the way. There is no such thing as a perfect mother. I have to emphasize that. Yeah. So if you're attaining to reach perfection, you will be disappointed. So better to let that go early on. But for anyone who does have a history, I think that it is a good thing to try and prepare for the next pregnancy and postpartum period, just in case it does happen again. Now, there are things you can do to prevent postpartum depression or anxiety. And the things I usually talk about are sleep, support, self-care, and medications if necessary. So sleep is probably the most important thing. I talk to all my patients about sleep because I just think so much of what I see is sleep induced. And if there is a way to protect your sleep, and that might mean if you're breastfeeding, once breastfeeding is established, giving a bottle in order to take a break at night. That might mean, I know it's very hard to nap during the day. And often I say, try to sleep at night when the baby's sleeping, because often the women I see are doers, and it's very hard to nap in the middle of the day when they think of all the other things they should be doing. But to try to get a longer stretch of sleep at night, to try to correct your sleep if there are issues, if you're having insomnia, to speak to someone about that. The second thing would be supports. And, it's very tricky now with COVID. I usually say you need to get helpful help. So be mindful of who is available, who is safe during COVID times, who you can trust, and who isn't too old themselves, because if you're going to get older grandparents, again, they might be at risk as well during COVID. So now it's very hard to get more help. And that's why I like when people have their partner available, and especially with partners working at home, sometimes they can take a break and help out. But remember, you need helpful help. So no one who's going to make you feel guilty or judgmental. No one who's going to come over and expect to be served a cheese platter. No one you need to clean your house for. So again, you don't have to portray this image of not just being the perfect mother, but the perfect homemaker and the perfect wife and the perfect daughter and everything else. So be picky on your supports. The other thing is self-care, and that is really important. That's where guilt comes in, like Tanya was saying. We think of ourselves last, and that just shouldn't be. And I love the analogy of, and I know none of us have been on an airplane for a long time, but I think we can remember when they say, put your oxygen mask on first before you put it on your child. And I fully believe in that, not just on flights, but in as an analogy for life, because I think you have to be happy. You have to be in a good place. You need time to yourself. And even if it means leaving and taking a break, and again, leaving the baby with someone who you can trust, or even might not trust right away, but as long as they're safe and they're not going to do something dangerous, you learn to trust them, and being able to get out and feel rejuvenated and re-energized. And the other interesting thing is during COVID, a lot of people are saying, well, I have nowhere to go. I have nothing to do. And I just say, that's bullshit. Who has nowhere to go? Who wants to be inside all day? I mean, this is the nicest time in Toronto right now. It's beautiful. It's not hot and humid. The leaves are changing. The sun is shining. Get out, put on a podcast, Go for a walk, go for a socially distanced walk with someone. I think it's so important to get that time to yourself, and just like I said, to feel rejuvenated and to feel better when you come back and have that energy to be with the baby. And that again also leaves you to trust others with the baby. And the final thing is medications, which I'm not going to go into, but they are safe in pregnancy and breastfeeding women. And we use a lot of different antidepressants, which work really, really well in this population. And they're very helpful. And sometimes if you were on an antidepressant the first time around, you might want to consider going on it again. So I'm going to leave it at that.
Thank you so much. I'm going to take a question from the audience now, so anybody can take this question. It says, hi, can postpartum depression show up even later, way after birth? So she mentioned 6 months in. I've heard people mention it at 18 months in. Is that possible? Or is it just, what's the difference between postpartum depression, I guess, and having a really just difficult time with the stage your child is at, or the sleep pattern fluctuations? Does anyone want to take that on?
Well, I'll start if that's okay, because
okay.
I deal with this a lot. It's very unusual for it to come up suddenly at 6 months postpartum. So I would question whether there was something else going on at the time. So the number one reason women suddenly develop postpartum depression or anxiety at 6 months is they get their period. That's the time when their cycle starts to regulate again. And often the baby's introduced to solids, or the baby starts sleeping through the night, hopefully. And the woman isn't breastfeeding as much. So often her cycle, her hormones are sort of out of whack. And until you start getting your period, you probably won't feel as well. So that's the first reason, a hormonal reason. The other thing is, I would say, what else is going on? What's going on at that time? I mean, is it that there is an external stressor that's happening that needs to be, looked at more carefully? Is there an issue, a marital issue? Are you moving? Is there an illness in the family? Is there something else going on? And the other thing I would look at is it really just starting at 6 months? Or was it kind of grumbling along and everything was okay? And maybe you thought it was because the baby wasn't sleeping, and that's why you were just so exhausted. And as soon as you get more sleep, you'll feel better. And then the baby started sleeping better at 6 months. And you're like, hey, why am I not feeling better? Why am I not sleeping better? So I also question whether it actually does start at 6 months. And just to let you know, in terms of the postpartum period, we define it as 12 months postpartum. So if you suddenly develop it at 18 months, I would say it's not postpartum. There's probably another reason for it. And but if you are, I have to stress, if you are feeling unwell, regardless of the timing, and you're really not feeling like yourself, go see someone, speak to someone about it. I cannot emphasize that enough. You should not be suffering alone.
Thank you so much. That's very, very important. And that's, I think, the goal of the self-care stage, is to reinforce that. Stop putting yourself last, Mom. Like we do such a good job thinking of others as in motherhood, and we always forget ourselves. This question here is for Dr. Bev. How can I get the baby's father to automatically take charge, know what needs to be done, and actually do it without me having to spell every single step out for him? How can I prevent myself from resenting him if this is the case?
So I'm sure we can all answer that question.
Yes, please go ahead.
I think we all hear a lot about that. Does anyone want to take that? Okay.
It's such a big topic. I'll take a snippet, and how about we all contribute to that? So I think that there are two pieces to this, and sometimes I get flack from people on Instagram. So hold your horses and hear me out. So there are two pieces. There is our part of the responsibility in the communicating. And then there is also like our partner's part to rise to the occasion and meet our need. Okay. When I'm working with individual moms, all I can work with them individually is on their piece of the puzzle, because partner's not there and we can't control that piece. And oftentimes there are supportive partners who are there who maybe just don't understand what the needs are and are open to meeting them. If this question is coming from someone who feels like they have clearly stated their need over and over again, and the partner is unwilling to actually meet the need, that is a different conversation that I think requires maybe some couples therapy or someone to really get in the mix and intervene, because there's a difference in not understanding what the need is and by accident, or sort of like not meeting it by not knowing. And then there's a like having communicated it and intentionally or sort of ignoring or dismissing the need. Okay. I just want to put that out there. But one, I think that if we don't know what we need, then our partner often can't know what we need. So it's so important for us to learn how to effectively communicate our needs. And if we're standing there, let's say we're washing the dishes and there's a pile of dishes and we're so resentful and things start to just trickle through our mind, like, oh, like I do all of these things and I never get support, or every time I come to the kitchen, there's a load of dishes here that I have to do. I do everything in the house. The house is a mess. Like, what is the actual need in that moment? And it is so critical for us to really tune in and understand. For me, at the end of a long day of momming, the majority of the time, my need is just like acknowledgement for the things that I do that are unseen. Or for maybe just a partner to come in and like communicate, hey, I'm exhausted. Can we tap out? Like, what is the actual need and how do you articulate it? I would say is a great place to start.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for that. I hope you don't mind if you move on. We have so many questions left and we're just about half an hour out until the end of the session. So this one is for Dr. Cutler. How do you, sorry, I just read that one. Will my low mood affect my attachment bond with my child? What's the best way to deal with I'm not my best mom self? That's like guilt in the question, isn't it? Oh
I'm going to ask you to read it again. I don't know if it was just me, but you timed out. So I actually didn't get the full question.
I'm so sorry.
No worries. Okay. I just want to answer properly.
Will my low mood affect my attachment bond with my child? That's the first question. And then what's the best way to deal with moments of guilt when I am not my best mom self? And that's in quotes, best mom self.
Okay. So I'm going to answer one of them, and then I will maybe ask you to remind me the second one, because my brain is good at that, or I'll remember. So will my low mood affect my child? I get asked this probably every day. It's one of the questions that people are most worried about. And I think that's because one of the ways we define good mother is by our child's behavior, or how our child is. So our child becomes the benchmark or the barometer, right? So do they sleep through the night? Are they eating? Are they having meltdowns, right? So sometimes we will already be figuring out how good we are based on how good they are, both in quotation. Why I say that is because you and your baby are unbelievably connected. And you're constantly in almost a musical interchange between the two of you. So of course, your moods affect your baby, and your baby's moods affect you. Your baby's body language, your baby's facial expressions, and yours. But what do we mean by affect? We mean that if you are attuned to them, if you are seeing them, they are going to change sometimes your own physiology, your own facial expression, and back and forth. And emotion regulation, a child's emotion regulation, largely does depend on mom. And so I think what happens is, and dad. So I think what happens is people hear that and they think, okay, so that means I have to be calm all the time. No. I mean, when your child's having a tantrum, there is this goal to be able to be this present, calm, unaffected by their tantrum, put on your bulletproof vest, all the things. But we also have to understand what attachment's actually about. And that's that it's not about, again, perfection. From our good enough motherness, from our mistakes, from our ruptures, our children have an opportunity, if we repair them, to learn that negative feelings are not necessarily destructive, to learn emotion regulation, to learn frustration tolerance, to learn separateness of mind. So your baby comes and they are their own person with their own temperament and their own way of being in the world. And so if you have your needs and you get angry and you say, I'm so sorry, mommy's so hungry, I shouldn't have yelled, next time I'm going to count to 10, but I'm going to eat something. You're teaching them a whole host of stuff right there. You're teaching them that they're lovable even when there's anger, that negative feelings can be repaired. You're teaching them that you have a separate mind than them. So maybe they weren't hungry, but you are. You're showing them that you need to take care of you. You're showing them that in relationships, we need to see and be seen, desire and be desired. You're teaching them so much. So I try to tell parents, yes, we want to try to be calm as best we can and use that pause when our child is having a tantrum and put on our bulletproof vest, because it's not about you. And when you have your quote unquote tantrums or your big feelings, the option of repair is there. And it's a super important option to remember how much value there is in it. Okay, I don't remember the second question. I told you.
The second question, yes. That was such a good answer. I feel like you covered some of the second question, but I'm going to ask it anyways. So the second part of the question was the best way to deal with moments of mom guilt when I'm not feeling like my best mom self. And I think you kind of addressed that.
I did, and I won't get to, I'll give like a quick snapshot. I think it goes back to Erica and then a combo of mine. So best ways to deal with mom guilt is, first of all, what are you defining yourself by? Combining with self-compassion. There's no such thing as a perfect mother. Identifying what is triggering my guilt. Is it my child's behavior because I think I'm supposed to be perfect, or I think my kid's they're supposed to be perfect, they're not supposed to have tantrums? Is it my own inner experience? So naming it. What is it that's causing me to feel this guilt? And then bringing on board the self-compassion for whatever that original feeling I talked about earlier is. Was it anxiety? Was it anger? Because that's going to create the space for you to ask for what you need, to ask for help, to the prior question. So they're actually all related in so many ways.
Thank you so much for that. And speaking of Erica, one of the questions here is, do good moms always enjoy motherhood, and do they get angry sometimes?
I think that these are such important questions because I think one of the biggest adjustments that I went through in motherhood, and then I know so many clients go through, is thinking that when we enter motherhood, it's going to be some like magical, blissful experience. And then you get sent home with this crying human. You're still bleeding. Your boobs are so swollen that you can't even function, can't sleep. You're sleep deprived. And then enters like the dark side that no one talks about. The darkness that can come with motherhood sometimes. So it's so important to understand that a good mom can feel frustration and resentment and irritability and, all of these things with the role of motherhood. And it doesn't mean that she is not appreciative and absolutely head over heels in love with her baby. So absolutely, mothers can feel all feelings welcome in motherhood, all the feelings. And particularly with anger, I think that this is one that is a major like shame and guilt trigger for moms, is that we set these expectations before motherhood, like I'm going to be the most zen mom you've ever encountered, and then I have 3 kids ages 3.5 and under, and I'm ready to pull my hair out with all of the needs that are, pulling at my legs and screaming from here, and mommy come wipe my bum, and I'm breastfeeding a baby, and you can't anticipate moment to moment like what motherhood is going to be for you. Sometimes that comes with irritability and anger or postpartum rage, even because so many of your needs are going unmet, or there's underlying postpartum depression and anxiety that is creeping up, or partner isn't attuned to our needs. There are so many things that can contribute to anger in motherhood. So the short answer being absolutely yes. Good moms experience, good enough moms experience all the feels. And Anger or any other big emotion is really like a check engine light going off on our car. If you're cruising down the road and you're on the highway and you're driving and your check engine light comes on because you're screaming at your toddler or something is happening that you feel unlike yourself, it's an indication for you to pull over the car off the highway, get out, walk around, do a 5-point inspection of your car and figure out what the heck do you need right now? You know, do you need to feed yourself? Do you need to have a nap? Do you need to call grandma or a neighbor to come relieve you so that you can have an hour to decompress? What is it that that alarm is sounding in that moment that needs to be met? And I think that when we shift away from guilt and shame, we actually can sit back and be curious about what our emotions are telling us instead of sink into this feeling of being an awful mom. So yes, we have all the feels, and they're actually there to serve us and guide us and protect us if we can explore them in a non-judgmental and curious way.
Beautiful answer. Non-judgmental being the key words there. We're so hard on ourselves, moms. We are just about close to the end, and I wanted to kind of ask you all a final question. I'm taking a look at the feed here, and just some really great discussions going on. Hopefully you guys will get the chance to scroll through. But a lot of people are asking about coping strategies. I have people that are saying that they hide in closets. Like, how do you cope, like, in the thick of it? Whether you guys are all touching on a very different aspect of motherhood. So if you can speak about some coping strategies that we can kind of like implement throughout our mom days, so we can, you know, not have to revert to anger or not let it pile up to that point. You know what I mean? If any advice around that, how do you even check in if you don't feel like you even have a moment in your day because of the chaos that, you know?
Yeah. Can I take that first for a second and then I'll...
Yes, please.
So I think that there are a couple of really important pieces. One, in the moment that is triggering you, like, know your triggers. Understand what your triggers are. Are your triggers that you're hungry, that your toddler's having a meltdown, that you haven't had any time for yourself today? Do some understanding and kind of curiosity and paying attention about what those triggers are. And two, if it is really with your child and you yell and it becomes this like power struggle or interaction, our goal in those moments actually has to shift from controlling our child's behavior and shift from trying to like get compliance to grounding ourselves. And grounding ourselves looks like a hand on the chest and a hand on the tummy, like 3 conscious deep breaths before we respond. It doesn't need to be like, we're not going to be able to leave and go for a pedicure, like how we might envision self-care. Self-care looks like, no, I'm going to take some like 3 deep breaths before I respond right now. I'm going to, you know, calm my nervous system. And then I'm going to respond after I've calmed myself. So that's one of the first pieces for me.
I can piggyback on that. I think often Dr. Young talks about the importance of anxiety, and anxiety being often underlying a lot, underlying the anger, underlying the sadness. And so when you're in that anxiety mode, your brain goes into something called, you might have heard, fight, flight, freeze, right? It's like a saber-tooth tiger is coming and you're ready. And so it's actually really the opposite of calm, right? It's the opposite of that. And it literally on a brain level is, right? It's not the rest and digest calm. And so what you're wanting to do is bring on board, stimulate that vagus nerve, that rest and digest, that calm. And so what that is going to look like can be a few very practical skills. It's first of all, the pause and knowing to pause. Some people have a lot of trouble with pauses. There's skills in certain treatments like dialectical behavior therapy where you might put pieces of ice in your hands to kind of trigger your pause. Because some people need that, and that kind of sends a wave through their body of that coolness. If you're able, turning on the running water, doing something, sometimes you need to move your body in space to a different place. Notice something you can see, focus on the bird out the window, and then yes, do those kind of breath in and actually trying to lengthen that breath out, that exhale to stimulate that vagus nerve. And then also giving yourself permission. All feels are okay, but if I can't get to what Dr. Young was talking about. If I can't get that pause, if I can't find pleasure in my moments, so all feelings can be ambivalent and complex, but they should be in motion. Moods should be in motion, and pleasure and joy should be one of those moods in motion. And if I'm not able to settle myself, if I'm not able to pause, if I'm not able to bring those emotions on board, then that's okay. And you might need to ask for help. And there are so many amazing people who are available to help you.
Thank you so much.
So I'm just going to end by saying I totally agree with what has been said and want to echo. And I think a lot of what we're talking about is mindfulness. And there are lots of great apps out there like Calm and groups also that you can join that are all online right now. But I want to emphasize the prevention of the meltdown, of your own meltdown. And I think you need to also learn from these episodes. What is going on? How could I have dealt with this better? How could I have prevented this from happening? And for a lot of the times, it's because you're just so worn out and you are doing everything. And I'm going to, again, emphasize the need to ask for help and the need to accept help and the need to understand that people are willing to help. They might not do it as well as you, and they might make mistakes. And the dad might put on the diaper upside down and the baby will have a back cramp. But you know what? He will get used to it, and he will know, then learn how to put on a diaper properly. So I think that if you allow others to help and not only accept the help, but maybe plan something regularly. That's the other thing. Don't wait until you get to that point to call someone in a panic. Plan it. If you have someone who is willing and able to help, get them to come and set a time, set a date, so you know that you have that time to yourself.
Thank you so much. What amazing answers. And speaking of help, speaking of asking for help, how can you guys be contacted in a professional capacity? Do you guys work virtually? I'm having a lot of questions about options for COVID-19.
Oh, you know, I'll start because I'm probably the strictest, because I'm at a hospital and we are very strict about our referrals. And right now, most women who do come to the perinatal mental health program at Mount Sinai are referred by Mount Sinai physicians, OBs. So by all means, if you have delivered there or you have an OB or a family doctor affiliated with Mount Sinai, that's the best way to get into the program. If you're looking for a group, we do accept people from outside of Sinai for our groups, and we run mindfulness groups, we run postpartum depression groups, we run a group for late losses, and we run a CBT group for anxiety and pregnancy and postpartum. But it's all run virtually now, unless it's urgent. We are seeing all our patients virtually. And the final thing I want to say about getting help from the Sinai end is we are now running a program. It's called the Summit Trial, where you can get, it's a 6 weeks one-on-one virtual session with a trained therapist. And it's mostly for those women who are having difficulty with what we call behavioral activation. So trouble getting out, people feeling stuck inside all the time. You do need to have depression or anxiety, even low grade, but it's a way to help you get up and out. And it is a trial. So right now it's free. So that's what I have to say about referrals.
Thank you so much. Who's next? Erica?
Sure. So I run a platform on Instagram at _happy as a mother. Every day I share what I would like to say is a pretty informative post that are little tidbits each day to help moms along their motherhood journey. I also carry a teletherapy practice and work with clients one-on-one throughout their adjustment to motherhood, understanding their anxiety and depression, supports in getting medications if that's what the track they need to take. And then I also have like different resources at different kind of fee scales, because I know that therapy can be inaccessible and expensive to some. So I run webinars as well. This Friday, I'm actually running a mommy rage or like, kind of angry mom webinar, which is really about teaching us how to ground ourselves and regulate ourselves in those really incredibly frustrating moments. And that's with Psyched Mummy, another major mummy account on Instagram. So lots of resources to be found over on my page. And my podcast is Happy as a Mother on iTunes, Google, Spotify. And today's episode is actually about perfectionism in motherhood with Dr. Jenna, a professor from Stanford, and it is incredible. So again, lots of amazing free resources there as well.
Awesome. I'm going to have to check that out. Thank you so much. And Dr. Tanya, how are you?
Hi. So you can find me on Instagram at Dr. Cutler. You can find my motherhood column on Psychology Today. It's called Motherhood Made Real. I provide individual psychotherapy and group psychotherapy. I have an identity group, a Mother to Woman, it's called, that runs ongoing, a 6-week group, but mothers can stay on. It's about the transition to motherhood. You do not need to have a diagnosis of postpartum depression or anxiety, but you can. And as a psychologist, I'm kind of monitoring all group members and do have separate sessions with the group members. And should they need to be referred to Mount Sinai or for medication, that's always part of the group. I run a bunch of workshops, and similar to Erica, at different fee levels. I'm doing with the Postpartum Stress Center, Karen Kleiman. There's an amazing workshop that's coming up that's specifically on mindfulness. We're doing a mindful parenting, so look out for that. November 12th, we're doing a hybrid together. It'll be a 2-hour workshop at very low fee. And so a bunch of stuff that are constantly coming around to try to help mothers and their children.
I want to sign up for that webinar. P.S. Yes. I feel like I want to be at that one.
Me too. I want to be at the Angry Mom webinar. There's so much here. You guys brought so much richness and knowledge, and I think we still have a little bit more time. And there's a big exchange happening in the comment section here. People are referring to different books, both kids books and adult books, that can help them navigate anything related to what we discussed today in regards to our moods, our fluctuating states, and all that jazz. So do you guys have any must-read books, for be it a kid book or an adult book, for the moms to take away or add in their Amazon cart just in time for Prime Day?
I'll answer that one first because everybody might disagree with me after this, but I don't like books. But I mean, a psychologist, 15 years in school, and I don't like books. But part of that is because I don't like the motherhood books very much, the parenting books. There are some gems. So that's not to knock all of them, and I'll mention a few of the gems that I think. But some of them, or at least the ones that have a way, in the context of everything we're talking about today, there isn't a way. So I'd like to try to kind of veer people away from the ways. When there is a way, those sometimes can feel shaming, especially when that way, whether it's sleep way or a feeding way, they can induce that guilt if it's not aligned with you. There is an amazing book. It's an old book. It's not often talked about, by Dan Stern, called The Birth of a Mother. It talks a lot about what I'm talking about in terms of what a mother goes through in that major identity shift. There is, and it's actually on my desk because I was using it with my patient this morning, there is a kind of sequel called The Diary of a Baby, and it's one of the most beautiful books around. It's written almost from the baby's point of view. And so it'll be like, 4 weeks old, oh, look at that light, and it's moving on the wall. And so it helps you understand what baby's going through during these various stages in a really lovely way, as if being written by the baby. And it's written by a psychologist, who also Dan Stern, who is really an infant specialist. And I also really do like The Art of Showing Up, or Power Showing Up, or I don't know, I'm ruining and butchering that amazing name, but it's something showing up.
Tina and Dan?
Yeah.
Is that one? Yeah. All about secure attachment, building secure attachment. I think that one is a really, really important book because essentially, so Tina Payne Bryson, I just had her on the podcast recently. She's like a New York Times bestselling author, multiple books with Dr. Dan Siegel. They've got like the Yes Brain, Whole Brain Child, No Drama Discipline, just like, killers. And one of the things, I had her on most recently on the podcast about the bottom line for babies. She has this book about all the science and research for the baby for the first year. And it's talking about everything from sleep training to attachment to postpartum depression to what sunscreen. Like, do you use sunscreen? Do you not? All the things that you kind of find yourself frantically researching in the first year of motherhood, that's a really good one that is based on sound research and doesn't push any one parenting agenda. So I really like that one. And two, the one that I think it's The Power of Showing Up or The Art of Showing Up. I know I can't think of it off the top of my head, is another one of Tina's books. Coming back to that question about like, will my mood disorder impact my attachment with baby? That book talks so much about what actually forms secure attachment, that it's not about being home with your baby as a stay-at-home mom 24/7. It's not about being zoomed in on your baby every waking second of the day. It's not about meeting their needs perfectly day in and day out. It really breaks down that it's about safety and security and all of these really important pieces. So that is a really great book as well.
Yeah, and they emphasize the consistency over time. So it's no singular behavior or singular moment. It's over time, and that's really key. And I'll talk about that more tomorrow in my talk here at Moms Tia.
Awesome. And Bev, any recommendations?
You know, it's funny. I agree with Dr. Cutler in that I don't usually advise reading books because I'm always afraid that the women will take too many shoulds from the books and take things, look at the things that they're not doing well, or that, you know, and have a sense of failure about that. So there are a few, I mean, again, from my perspective, more clinical books like the Postpartum Blues by my colleague Ariel Dolphin, and the Postpartum Anxiety workbook. It's a CBT workbook, which is really good. Very practical and helpful. I actually love, I think it's Karen Kleiman who wrote The Postpartum Husband. Postpartum Husband. I love that book. It's a great book for your partner. And so I, you know, again, I don't subscribe to any particular books, just, you know, even when it comes to sleep training, I'm like, you know what, find one that resonates with you. So I don't think it's a one size fits all. But yeah,
that's awesome.
To our point. I really think it plays to our point. Like, and even in Tina's book, The Bottom Line for Baby, like, what does the research say? It essentially says that the bottom line is that you have connection with your child and you know how to repair when ruptures happen, and that you are consistently like attuning to their needs and trying to work out this complex relationship with them. It's not about adhering to any type of parenting style or sleep style or any, you know, no parenting camp is favored more than the other. It's really about the attunement, the attachment, the repairs when we rupture that attachment. And I think that's a really great takeaway from all of the things that we're saying today, really come back down to that connection with your child.
Thank you so much. There's so much beautiful wisdom shared here today. I wrote so many notes. Where do I even start with these notes? But from what I'm gathering here, ways to cope. According to Erica Jossa, respond, don't react is basically the summary of what I received from what you were saying. If you can take a moment to take those 3 intentional breaths, it will make a world of a difference, and you'll actually be able to respond instead of reacting right away. Beth Young, it was all about catching yourself before you get to that reactive state. Be more in tune with your triggers and kind of diffusing, like nipping them at the bud before they become, you know, full-grown thistles that are like also very quite painful to pull out of the ground at that point. And from Dr. Tanya, there's not one way to do this. There isn't. I guess everyone said that kind of, but there's not one way to do this motherhood thing. We are all such tough critics. And when we try to define what a good mom is, it's still kind of ambiguous. It still kind of depends on so many different things. So as far as being hard on ourselves goes, my biggest lesson from Dr. Cutler was self-compassion is the key here, because it's a lot. It's a lot for all of us. We are doing such a fantastic job, even if nobody tells us that on a regular basis, like we would wish, you know, even if our husbands sometimes, you know, don't seem to notice. I think it's important for us to be able to be a source of our own sense, our own like internal appreciation for what we do. Because in my experience, seeking external validation will always leave you starving for more. You know what I mean? Like if you can become this self-repelling machine of like self-love and compassion, then I think that'll be the ideal situation. However, of course, it's difficult to get there without the help. So please do seek out help if you do need it. These wonderful women here are ready and willing to help you virtually during COVID-19. And though they don't recommend books, I'm a big fan of books. Books changed the game for me. I call it like bibliotherapy, because for me, like, for example, a book I read called How Not to Hate Your Husband After Kids, I promise you saved my marriage. I didn't know what was happening with my husband. It's like it's like I had another child. Like he froze and I like became this like super mom, alpha mom. And I was like, it's like there was no room for him basically. But it taught me how to like reel that back a little bit. And like be more mindful of myself and give him a little bit of space to kind of grow and develop his own little parenting style instead of like hovering over him, like breathing on his neck. Like that's never a relaxing time. But anyways, and for your time, hopefully we can all connect to each other on socials. And I'm looking forward to your talk tomorrow at the MomFest event for mental health, Dr. Cutler. I'm so looking forward to that. I love the way that you speak, so eloquent, all of you. And yeah, thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Stay healthy, everyone.